Hi class, my name is Ashley Thomas, and here's my presentation on competency to be executed and waive appeals. This presentation will consist of summarized but very informational overview of what was provided to us in the textbook. Therefore, we are going to discuss the author's opinion and also their suggestions on the topic. So let's talk about the origins of competency in relation to being executed. One of the biggest cases in relation to this topic is Ford versus Wainwright. Ford was convicted of murder in 1974, and he was sentenced to death. It was said that throughout his prison stay, his mental health severely declined. He was said to walk around mumbling in an unknown language. He believed the Ku Klux Klan was conspiring to have him commit suicide. He believed the prison was also holding his family hostage, and more. It was believed around the prison that he was malingering. However, in the end, Ford was not executed, but transferred to Florida State Hospital after being found incompetent to be executed. I added a YouTube link in the description to a video that goes more in depth about this case and how substantial it was in relation to competency to being executed. And pardon the monotone voice in the video. Once you get past that, it is very informational. In this case, it was held by the court that the Eighth Amendment, which bans cruel and unusual punishment, prohibits execution of an insane person. However, the court never formulated a definition of competence. So, of course, that left room for different interpretations. Justice Powell concluded a similar notion, adding that the Eighth Amendment forbids the execution only of those who are unaware of the punishment that they are about to suffer and why they are about to suffer it. He added that the state should presume the prisoner's competence at the time of the sentence be carried out, and that it will take a significant presentation of insanity to trigger a hearing process. So most states took that and ran, adopting a similar notion. For example, Florida says that it must be shown that the defendant understands the nature and the effect of the death penalty before execution. The American Bar Association differed just a little, calling for the exemption of capital punishment for any individual who has a mental disorder or disability that significantly impairs their capacity to understand the nature and purpose of this punishment. And that the reasoning behind this is because the primary purpose of competence to be executed is retribution. So they felt that if retribution is truly the goal, the defendant should not only understand why they are being executed, but also be able to internalize why that decision would have been made in the first place. The next prominent case in relation to this matter is Panetti versus Quarterman. Panetti was convicted for murdering his wife's parents. In this case, the court concluded that even if a person did meet Justice Powell's test, they may still be incompetent if their awareness of crime and punishment has little to no relation to the understanding of those concepts. So basically, in this case with Panetti, he understood that he would die if executed, and he also understood why the state would come to that ruling, but he still believed that the state's real reason for executing him was in relation to his preaching activities. So he still believed that it was a big conspiracy. His rationale for the execution was not the same as his rationale of understanding it. Another thing that came from this case was a decent definition of competence to be executed. So this definition basically says the mental state required for competence to suffer capital punishment neither presumes nor requires a person who would be considered normal or layperson. Someone who was condemned to death for atrocious murder may be so callous as to have no guilt and is so self-centered to lack compassion. They may even transfer the blame to others and be out of touch with reality. The book mentioned two structured professional judgment tools or assessment tools to be relevant. The first one is Ebert's competency to be executed. So this consists of 12 items that include 8 questions related to functional legal abilities and 4 related to clinical inquiries. The second assessment they mention is the interview checklist for evaluations of competency and execution. And that one addresses the same domains that Ebert's did, but it goes in greater depth. Our textbook did have a table on this. If anyone was interested, it's table 7.1. Now, it's very important that neither of these measures are to be used alone in the act of evaluating competence, but instead it should be used as a part of a bigger clinical inquiry or assessment. Ebert was very heavy on gathering background info to assess competence, and that is shown in his judgment tool. So he wanted to focus on things like employment history, military background, childhood information, and even marriage and relationship history. However, the author of the book, our textbook, Melton, suggested that it is more practical to focus on the current state of competence. So that would be gathering recent information that is more likely to give us more information about the inmate's functioning. That would include things like current emotional behavior, cognitive functioning, and how they're doing around the prison currently. It is also suggested that the necessary information for competence is gathered during multiple visits so you can get a full scope on the individual's competence. And also that it is done in an environment that is properly arranged to facilitate clinical assessments. Being that this career integrates the law and psychology, it is important to think about the different opinions that could raise ethical issues and dilemmas to the job. One of the issues that arise when it comes to competence is to be executed, is if we should play that role anyway in evaluations. So the Board of American Psychology Association opposed the participation of psychologists in routine certification of competency for execution because they feel that our participation is unnecessary in that evaluation, and it should only be based on the possibility of bringing new information that may change the verdict. Okay, class, and that is my presentation for competency summed up. I do want to leave you with a discussion question to ponder. So consider the information provided to you in this presentation and also in the book. If you are assigned to give an evaluation on competence for execution, how would you go about gathering information? More specifically, do you believe that you would be better at focusing on the past? That would be the marital relationship history, educational employment history, military background. Or do you think that it would be more beneficial to focus on the current scope of the individual's competence? That would be the current emotional, behavioral, and cognitive functioning. That's the approach that was favored more for our textbook author. And last but not least, here's my reference page referencing our textbook and the videos used. Thank you so much for your time.